Hey everybody, this is my response to the reading on sociocentric thought. And one of the things I was just looking at before I started filming was another name for this, of course, is groupthink. And if we say groupthink, pretty much everybody kind of knows it's not a good thing. I actually enjoyed the reading more than the video, but I think that's because the video didn't go into the same depth. I actually like this chapter, but I actually also, look at things this way, but it kind of fit into some of the thinking I was doing about my threads when I was looking at those and realizing I take such a contradictory approach to things. I'm I don't know, kind of an anti-groupthink idea. But it is interesting that sociocentrism is so prevalent. But we are social beasts. We do live in social groups. It is common. But we seem to be in a period, and I have my book today. There was a point where I noted that where we were in some ways, where we currently were in our culture in some ways were exactly what this thing is describing. It was on page 239 when they were talking about how groupthink is dangerous, and they ended with saying, in short, throughout history and to the present day, sociocentric thinking has led directly to the pain and suffering of millions of innocent persons. This has been possible because groups in their sociocentric mindset use their power in a largely unreflective, abusive way. Once they have internalized a self-serving ideology, they are able to act in ways that flagrantly contradict their announced morality without noticing any contradictions or inconsistencies in the process. And we would normally call this mob thought or mob rule or mob action. And as I read that particular quote, I could not help but think of the world we currently live in and how we are currently seeing a great deal of this sort of sociocentric thought so overwhelmingly everywhere. We talk constantly about echo chambers, and that's part of what it's telling us not to do, and it's telling us once we get past that. And I have all kinds of little notes that I made for myself in here where I noticed something that connected to politics and something that connected to Michel Foucault's theories on power. And then they talked about the importance of words and what they mean. And I was like, yeah, I always tell people semantics and etymology matter. I was fascinated by their idea of talking about ideology in this way. We all, of course, have an ideology. It just depends on how we stick to them together. I thought the critique of the mass media was quite interesting given the current climate in our culture about media. And I think they do in terms... Modern mass media is moving into echo chambery situations because that's what, sadly, it looks like people want. So as I looked at this, I thought, yeah, this is true. Some of this is, and every nation's news is. And one of the things I thought most fascinating in the chapter occurred earlier on page 236 when the UNESCO study where they were talking to the children, and The first child, Michael, was pretty much, very sociocentric thinking. And the kid who was Maurice D, I actually looked at him and they were, all of them were thinking sociocentrically. But the kid, Maurice, understands what he's saying. His example showed that someone as young as 8 could understand this concept, because he's like, of course the Swiss are going to think this and the French are going to think this. No. I still think, and he goes, I see this, but I still think it's the Swiss. So he hasn't made that jump, but he shows somebody who early on is kind of making it. And then when I got to the capacity to recognize unethical acts, I started, and it's sad, but I started laughing that you actually have to tell people these things are unethical. But then again, ethics are kind of my cup of tea. And it was a sad laugh. But it was an interesting chapter. It's probably the one I've most enjoyed yet, and I saw some stuff I might try to adapt for my writing students in ways of looking at and looking up for ideology in simply newspaper articles or anything they read. So, for once I liked something. Go figure. On to my threads.